It is the latest in a string of attacks.
Natanz is just in the middle of the desert. When they were building it in secrecy, they were calling it Desert Irrigation Facility. There is a lot of artillery and air force. It's better protected against attack from air than any other nuclear installation I have seen. So this is deeply underground. A centrifuge. You feed uranium in and you have a cascade, thousands of centrifuges, and from the other end you get enriched uranium out. It separates uranium based on spinning, the rotors. It spins so fast, 300 meters per second, the same as the velocity of sound. These are tremendous forces, and as a result, the rotor, it twists, looks like a banana at one point of time. So it has to be in balance because of any small vibration, it will blow up.
So a centrifuge, it's driven by an electrical motor. And the speed of this electrical motor is controlled by another PLC, by another programmable logic controller.
Centrifuges spin at incredible speeds, about 1,000 hertz.
They have a safe operating speed, 63,000 revolutions per minute.
Stuxnet caused the uranium enrichment centrifuges to spin up to 1,400 hertz.
Up to 80,000 revolutions per minute.
What would happen was those centrifuges would go through what's called a resonance frequency. It would go through a frequency at which the metal would basically vibrate uncontrollably and essentially shatter. And then the second attack they attempted was they actually tried to lower it to 2 hertz.
They were slowed down to almost standstill.
And at 2 hertz, sort of an opposite effect occurs. You can imagine a kid's top, a toy top that you spin, and as the top begins to slow down, it begins to wobble at the very end. That's what would happen to these centrifuges. They would begin to wobble and essentially shatter and fall apart.
Here is a piece of software that should only exist in the cyber realm, and it is able to affect physical equipment in a plant or factory and cause physical damage.
Real-world physical destruction. At that time, things became very scary to us. Here you had malware potentially killing people. It wasn't lost on us that there were probably only a few countries in the world that would want and have the motivation to sabotage Iranian's nuclear enrichment facility. So at Symantec, we have probes on networks.
We've actually seen infections of Stuxnet all over the world.
It spread to any Windows machine in the entire world.
In France, Germany,
We
all
had
over Europe.
these organizations inside the United States who were in charge of industrial control facilities saying, we're infected, what's going to happen?
Could have very dire consequences. There was a deadline coming up where this threat would trigger and suddenly would like turn
Inform the
off.
secretary, inform the White House, inform the other
Start
departments,
shutting things down or
wake up the world and figure out what's going on.
We're going to create something new, something evolved, that's going to be far, far, far more aggressive.
Stuxnet wasn't just an evolution. It was really a revolution in the threat landscape. We realized that we needed to do what we call deep analysis. Pick apart the threat, every single byte, every single 0 and 1, and understand everything that was inside of it. When looking at the Stuxnet code, it's 20 times the size of the average piece of code, but contains almost no bugs inside of it. And that's extremely rare. Malicious code always has bugs inside of it. This wasn't the case with Stuxnet. It's dense, and every piece of code does something, and does something right in order to conduct its attack. One of the things that surprised us was that Stuxnet utilized what's called a zero-day exploit.
A zero-day exploit is an exploit that nobody knows about except the attacker. So there's no protection against it. There's been no patch released. There's been 0 days protection, against it. That's what attackers value, because they know 100% if they have this 0-day type of exploit, they can get in wherever they want.
We became more worried because immediately we discovered more 0 days. And again, these 0 days are extremely rare.
The next very big surprise came when we infected our lab system. We figured out that the malware was probing the controllers. It was quite picky on its target. It didn't try to manipulate any given controller in a network that it would see. It went through several checks, and when those checks failed, it would not implement the attack. It was obviously probing for a specific target.
It was doing something with Siemens software, possibly Siemens hardware.
Stuxnet was targeting a very specific hardware device, something called a PLC, or a programmable logic controller.
The PLC is kind of a very small computer attached to physical equipment like pumps, like valves, like motors.
What it was doing was replacing the code that's normally on that programmable logic controller with its own code. Those programmable logic controllers control things like power plants, power grids.
This is used in factories, it's used in critical infrastructure.
So the payload of Stuxnet was designed to attack some very important part of our world.
Moving forward in my analysis of the code, it was absolutely clear that this piece of code was attacking an array with 6 different groups of, let's just say, thingies, physical objects, and in those 6 groups there were 164 elements. We then were able to establish a very good match between the attack code and the configuration of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant. There were these 6 groups of centrifuges, and each group had 164 entries. And guess what? That was a perfect match to what we saw in the attack code.
They built in all the code and all the logic into the threat to be able to operate all by itself. It had the ability to spread by itself. It had the ability to figure out, do I have the right PLCs? Have I arrived in the cans? Am I at the target?
And when it's on target, it executes autonomously. That also means you cannot call off the attack.
Was the U.S. involved in any way in the development of Stuxnet?
Cyber attacks on the Iranian nuclear program that you ordered.
The Stuxnet virus